Yesterday we learned from a speech given by the Lubavitcher Rebbe. When did he give the speech, by the way? Let's see, where is this? Oh, here it is. Here it is. When did he give the speech? Here, let me have a look over here. This was a speech given by the Lubavitcher Rebbe in it says one here. Let's see over here. This is a speech given by the Lubavitcher Rebbe from 1967. 1967, and it's printed in Likuti Sichot in the books of the Rebbe's speeches. There's like 40 books, at least, of the Rebbe's speeches that he went over these speeches, and he brought down all of the sources for everything that he said. Likuti Sichot, book number 9, Tet. Okay. So what have we talked about now? We're commenting on the sentence here. Let's see, I brought down the sentence. It says, the sentence is that God will return with the Jewish people, and he will have mercy, and he will gather the Jewish people from all the nations that he scattered us there. Okay, so the Rebbe up to now, he explained like this, that God is in exile. He's in exile together with the Jews. And he is going to gather us up. So this is 1 second. If God is in exile with the Jews, how can he gather us up? He's stuck there in prison with us. I mean, is he outside that he's going to take us out? So he says, and this is what Rashi says. Here, let's go. Here we got Rashi. Rashi said that God, so to speak, declared exile for himself. It says that from here we learn that God, that the Shekhinah, that's another name for God, that he is with the Jewish people in the pain of their exile. In the pain of their exile. And if you remember, one minute. Yeah. And if you remember, something happened. 1 second, 1 minute. I did something wrong over here. Let's go back over here. Oh. No. Okay, I'm going to have to. 1 second, what happened? Yeah, here it goes. Good. Okay. Okay. So it says that God is with the Jewish people in their pain. And the Rebbe asked the question, 1 second, the sentence doesn't say anything about pain. It doesn't say anything, but it says God will return with your exile. And Rashi says this comes to show that God is with the Jewish people in their pain of their exile. And the Rebbe asked, where did Rashi get this thing about pain? It doesn't say anything about pain. God is with the Jewish people in their exile. What do they have to pay? So someone or other God, and when they go out, God, he signs the release papers for himself. So that's what the Rebbe asked. If God is with the Jewish people, then how can he get out? I mean, he declared himself to be an exile. So it said, the Rebbe said, that's what it means. That God, of course, is not in exile. But the pain of the Jews, he feels. And so God is with the Jews in the pain of exile. God feels their pain. Now, of course, you can ask yourself a question. 1 second, God is infinite. You can't say things like that about God. Okay, number one, it's not me saying it, it's Rashi saying it. So Rashi was a very religious Jew, and he was, you can rely on what he was saying, a very God-fearing Jew. And not only that, he knew the whole Torah, he knew everything. So if he said it, obviously there must be something to it. So we got the wrong idea of infinity. If we think that God is infinite and he doesn't care about us, so we're limiting God. We're the ones that are wrong. The fact of the matter is that God feels our pain and that God suffers together with the Jews. And that's what it means that he is in exile. He's in the whole process of the exile that the Jewish people are found in, and he feels the pain. According to this, now we can also understand. We can also understand what Rashi says. Rabotenu lomdu mikan. Why does Rashi say that from here the rabbis learned that God is in exile with the Jews? And the Rebbe said, what do you mean from here we learned? It says by the burning bush that God is with the Jewish people. Hagam, even though that in Rashi's, and there's a sentence that says, Imo anechi batzoro, there's a sentence that says in Psalms that I am with the Jews in their pain. Says, what do you mean God learns it from here? Says, because says the Rebbe, I'll tell you what. From the sentence that God says that I am with the Jews in their pain, Veisman, this indicates only as mitzad dem gadol achiba, because of the great dearness of God to the Jews, is then Yidden, when the Jews, Yefinen sich in Tzorah, when the Jews are in pain, God forbid, Vert euch der Eibishter, therefore, and God also has pain. Right? You read in the paper that your good friend got hurt. When something happened, I feel so bad. I don't believe it. I call the person up. I feel so terrible. About from those other sentences, you can think that God loves the Jews so much that he gets pain from hearing about their pain. Was the Rebbe, because there hat sich bewiesen zu Moshe, that God showed this also to Moses in the sneh, in the burning bush. Daran was stecht. This is a thorn which pierces. This indicates what? That as is zich mishtatef, that God joins together with the pain of the Jews. In macht eng, it makes God pain the how do you say the sticking, the wounds, so to speak, of the exile and the pain of the Jews. But God is from afar, but he's very close to us. He loves us. But over here we say, but that with the fact that it makes the pain from the Jews meant nor nit as is in Gullus. It doesn't, that God has pain from the Jews, it doesn't mean that he's with the Jews. It doesn't mean that he's with us. He's, how do you say, he sympathizes with us. God sympathizes with the Jews. But God is not with the Jews in exile. As his blois, it's just what, one second. Okay, let's just do it here. What the Yiddish tsar, that the pain of the Jews, when Soros verschafft im Tsar, it causes God pain. That we can learn from the burning bush, that we can learn from the sentence in Psalms, that God has pain when we have pain. Right? But from this sentence, it says that God returns with the exile. From this, says Shav Hashem Elokecha, learned, or else we can learn that the Shekhinah is together with the Jews in the pain of exile. As the Shekhinah lane, that God's presence itself is not just observing, but it, so to speak, is together with the Jews in exile. So this is a good reason that we should want Moshiach to come now and take us out of exile, because God is suffering in exile. And I didn't make this up. This is, the Torah says it. And Rashi is just explaining what it says in the Torah. Al Pizeh, according to this, Vert Ober and the Shaila, so there's still the question, Vibalt as Oich, der Eberste, because God also is in the exile, is in the pain of exile. Oich he is, God is supposed to, so to speak, Oich is, so to speak, in the exile of the other nations. Heint via Zoi vet oisken zich zusammen mit the Yidden from Gullus. If God is in exile, so he's in exile also with the, I'm sorry, I said wrong. If God is in exile together with the Jews among the nations of the world, we're in exile. And I mean, just to say very shortly, even in Israel, the Jews are in Israel. So the whole, how do you say, drive of Israel, the government, is to be like, as much as possible, the nations and to be liked by them. And, we can't understand the United Nations. Why don't you like us? Come on, be friends with us. We like us, right? Please, please be, don't you listen to reason as this. So that's called exile. That's called exile. So if God is together with us in exile, so God is also over there sitting in the Knesset and saying, please, nations, please like us. He's also together with exile. So how can he take us out? How can he let us out? He's trapped himself, so to speak. I mean, if God can get pain from us, so he's also, anything goes. See, his dacha savora. So we can say very simply, as men zet in muchash, we can see clearly that even a 5-year-old child, that ein chavush matar atzmo, a 5-year-old child knows that if a person is in prison with others, it's like one prisoner turning to the other and saying, get us out of here. It's just, I'm in the same place as you. If God is in exile with the Jews, how is he going to get us out? Everybody knows that. A prisoner cannot release himself. So God, so to speak, is in exile. He has to have some sort of outside help, and it seems that he doesn't have. Well, then that's what Rashi says, when the Jews go out, that God writes up, he signs a paper of release for himself. Either before God, and goes before God put himself into exile, and he feels the pain of the Jews, that God already wrote a paper, so to speak, a document of freedom. Thus is given einmal b'midbar. It was one time in the desert, as then es ved kumen, when it will come, the time from Nigalim, that the Jewish people will be released. Right? God said, I know you're going to be in exile. This week's Torah portion, I know that you're going to be in sin, you're going to do exile. But God said, when it comes time for the Jews to be released from exile, when Yidden, Velen, Darfan, Oiskelezen, when Jews will be released from exile, from all over the world, and they'll come to their Jewish senses, Zolan Deshari, I'm sorry, and then all of the ministers and the angels, or whatever, which they rule over, so to speak, over God, Nitaben kind, they won't have any opinion in them. Veshav Hashem Elokecha, and God will go out. And thus, and this this is what Rashi means. Hichtiv Geula Latzmo. That's what it means, that God wrote down, he declared a release for himself. What does it mean he declared a release for himself? As heir, that God will Arain ge Shriben, that God wrote down before the redemption. So what's it saying? We have a problematic sentence here in the Bible. The sentence says that God will return with the Jews. Shav Hashem et shavutcha. God will return with the Jews from exile. That's what it says. Simple meaning. Unless we want to say, no, it's a grammatical thing. That's the thing. We don't understand God's ways, and it doesn't, of course, but God is not in exile. And says the Rebbe, it's not so. And Rashi says it's not so, that God is in exile. And all the rabbis agree that God is in exile. What is God in exile from? From the pain of the Jews. The pain of the Jews, God feels their pain. But God doesn't feel their pain from far away. God feels their pain because that's what brings him into the exile. He suffers the pain of the Jews because he himself is in exile with the Jews. So how is he going to take them out? It says because God declared he wants to be together with the Jews in exile, which maybe explains a little bit about why we don't see big miracles like going out of Egypt. Why are our soldiers beautiful and beautiful Jews with faces like angels? Why are they getting killed over there in Gaza? It's called, how do they call it? Why are they getting killed over there, right? And the whole world says there should be more killed. We're the bad guys. Why doesn't God do something? What's going on? This is because God is in exile. God is in exile with us. So to speak, his hands are tied. He declared exile from himself. How is he going to take us out? Because God also declared that there's going to come a time, and God knows when the time is, and I'm signing a paper freeing myself. And so a person might think because that God declared that he's going to free himself, he wrote a document of freedom for himself. So is be'et as vert kumen, when will come the time that God will redeem the Jews, as God will go out from exile first. And then after that, er's dernach, as vet oislingen, then he'll pull the Jews out. Is Rashi adds, it says, no, that God is going to return with them. That's what the sentence says. Shav Hashem Elokecha et Shavucha. God will come back with the Jews. Shav Hashem Elokecha, that God himself will return together with the Jews. Et Shavucha. Et means with the Jews. Zusammen, together, mitten care, together with the return of the Jews. When calls them on, and all the time, as vet nit nishalem, there's not been complete the gathering together of all of the Jews from everywhere. Afilu ven blois ein yid, even one even if one Jew remains in exile, is Shechina Shoria, that God's presence is together with the Jews in pain of the exile. Huh? So we have to have mercy on God. God is suffering. Does this make any sense? Totally not. Is it true? Totally yes. It says in the Torah. So if so, God is with the Jews, but he wrote a freedom for himself. So he has a pull that he can take the Jews out, but he's suffering together with the Jews, even if there's after everything we said, is nothing moving, neat moving. It's still not understood. And emes, yes, it's the truth that because the fact that the Shekhinah is with the Jews in exile, in the pain of their exile, so it comes out a difference in them geula, also in the redemption. What does it mean? As the Eibishter, that God will surikeren from Saras Agolos, that God will take himself out of the pain of exile. The Chirush Inyan is Doch Aber Be'ikr. The main thing is not so much about the pain, but about the exile. Haint Farvos Zocht the pasuk. Why does it say in the sentence V'sham the Shav Hashem et Shavutcha? What does it mean that God will return from the exile? What does it mean God will return from the exile? The return. Just say that God will go out, but God will go out. Therefore, Rashi continues and it says, with the same lesson, this means the sentence to say, as this is relevant to mainly in the geula, in the redemption of gathering the Jews together. Let's have a look. Let's have a look again. Let's have a look again. Rashi says, Ba'od yesh lomar. And Rashi says, Shegadol yom kibbutz galios. Great is the day of the gathering of the exile. Ubakushi, and it's with great difficulty. Ke'ilu hu atzmo, is that God himself must tzorich liot oches biyadav mamash. He has to hold on to each and every Jew's hand, each mamakomo, each person from his place. Like it says, va'atem teluktu le'achad echad b'Yisrael, that God gathers the Jewish people one at a time. Oh. So you might think that that God goes out of exile and he's just stopped the pain of the exile. He's gone under the pain and says, no, and that what? So what does it mean that God has to return with the Jews? God went out of the pain of the exile and he takes the Jews back. He says, no, it's not so. The fact of the matter is that God is with the Jews, and his pain now is that he has to take every Jew out. And that's what it means. Main the pasuk, it means to say, as voses nogea, what do we care about gathering the Jews together? God just takes them out of exile. The baltas, the kibbutz, because the gathering together of all the Jews from all of the places where they are, this is a very difficult thing. Therefore, it says over here, V'shav Hashem Elokecha. That's why it says that God will come back with you. Shav Hashem Elokecha val by azah groisa and shver, because such a great and a difficult thing is kentik. It is noticed as thus tut the Eibishter line that only God is doing it. In other words, the very going out of exile, you can think that God said, okay, that's it. There's not going to be any more problems. I'm stopping the exile. Just like I went out of exile, right? No problem. As the Jews will go out with their own problem. So if so, what does it mean that God goes out with the Jews? God going out was no problem. God just went out. He decided. And the Jews going out, it's going to be a process. So what does it mean God goes out with the Jews? So it says because God is going to have to take every Jew out individually. Because we're talking about here about human beings. We're not talking about sheep. And God wants, when it means that people we return to God, it means from your own totally free will. Not because of the great miracles, and not because you're afraid, and not because you suddenly realize that, the day of judgment has come, or that all your friends are doing it, so you do it. No. Everyone is going to decide on their own. I don't have to be like anybody else. I don't have to serve God. I don't have to be Jew, but I want to. I want to do it. I want to do it. Why? Because all of a sudden God will take every person and you see a lot of times it happens. There's stories about the Rebbe. There's hundreds and hundreds of stories about the Lubavitcher Rebbe and people that testified themselves, people that had growths, cancerous growths, and the doctor said this, and the Rebbe gave him a blessing and it went away. People that were clinically dead, and the Rebbe said, "Don't you do this," and then they came back to life. People that were lost, the people they got found, people that were in terrible problems in jails, and the Rebbe took them out. Hundreds of stories, and there's certain people are very impressed by it, and some people say, okay, so and another person all of a sudden he hears that a great pianist playing, and the pianist says, well, I'm a Jew, and I put on tefillin. What? The great master pianist, he put woo. This is it. That it changes his whole life, right? And other people say, "What do I care if he puts out the film?" God has to take every single person, do something individual for every single person, that it comes into his essence and realizes, "Wow, I am a Jew. I'm going to start acting, living, thinking, feeling like a Jew." And every person is impressed in a different way. So therefore, it's very difficult, so to speak, for God to do it. That's why the first of the 10 commandments is, I am God that took you out of Egypt. Now you might think, what's the big deal? God took us out of Egypt. God creates Egypt. He creates the whole world. God can do anything he wants, right? The first of the 10 commandments is, I am God that took you out of Egypt. That God is bragging. I took you out of Egypt. It says because God creates Egypt, and God wants there to be Egypt. And he wants the Jewish people to be in Egypt. And he wants the Jewish people to be intimidated by Egypt, and that they have to resist the peer pressure. The Egyptians were the rulers, and they were the successful, and the Jews were believers, and they were the minority, and they were the slaves. What did the Jews get from believing in God? What did they get from believing it? They just became slaves, and abject, terrible slaves, and they suffered awful, and they lived, and the Egyptians were living high and enjoying life and parties and all that. Egypt, what they get? Why? Because God wanted to take the Jews out, not just from the physical place called Egypt, but also from the spiritual thing of Egypt. He wanted to show the Jewish people that it was worthwhile to believe in him all this time. Unfortunately, when the pressure was gone from the Jews, is they didn't know exactly, they knew how to act under pressure, but they didn't know how to act under freedom, right? The freedom drove them crazy. Okay. So it says that's what it says in the future. God will take up the vow. But a Zoe grace, it'll be such a tremendous, difficult thing that God is going to do. It'll be recognized that this comes from God alone. Okay, 3 minutes more. But from this is going to come another question. By a 5-year-old child. It says that Rashi only answers questions that a 5-year-old child will ask when learning. A 5-year-old child will ask. He doesn't answer questions that are, it says over there or something else, and it says over here something. A 5-year-old child will ask about simple meaning, right? There's sentences that he learned earlier in the Bible, and all of a sudden comes this sentence, and it's like, how can it say this over here and it says that over there, right? Simple questions that a normal, clever child, Jewish child will ask. Ask a question. If the gathering the Jewish people is so difficult, is doch das nicht verbunden, so it's not connected with the gathering of the Jews alone. Why? Because that all of the Jews are like one person. Is there kibbutz gathering from all the Jews? It's easier from gathering all of the other nations. The Havdil, so to speak. And the Jewish people, they're not connected one to the other. The non-Jews. It says that in the future that God is going to return all of the various nations, there's the 70 nations in the world, that they're all going to be put back on their land. There was a king called Sanherib, and he conquered the whole world. This is like in the middle of the second temple, whatever it is. First temple. So he conquered the whole entire world, and he scattered all the nations all around. He was very clever. He knew that a person, if their feet are not on their land, that they feel insecure a little bit. So he figured to move everyone around, and they'll all get all mixed up. And so then they won't have any sort of a power of defiance that they can conquer him. And that's pretty much how we remained until today. So it says that God is going to return all the nations back to their true lands. To their true lands. So you might think, okay, the Jews, they have one thing in common. They're all Jews. So therefore, why does it say that God will only return? The Haint Farbos is their pasuk, Madgish is their Shav Hashem Elokecha, is Havaya, your God, only for the Jews. Right? God can't do it, but maybe he can't do it for other nations also. Only for the Jews can do it. Therefore, Rashi, he says, no, he says in the sentence, Gadol Yom Kibbutz Galios, great is the day of the gathering of the Jews together, and it's difficult, as though God himself has to go and hold on to each and every hand from wherever they are. Like it says, they will be gathered together, Bnei Yisrael, the Jewish people. By the Jewish people, there is a thing of each and every person from his place. And it says also in the exiles of the other nations, we find the same thing. Like it says that God will return the exile of Ammon. Varum, because Seiz Gadol Darv Zayin Hu Atzmo. So it has to be that God himself also returns all the other nations. But it says he's not going to gather them up one at a time. God will return all the other nations, but he won't return them one at a time. Because by the Jews, especially, every Jew is different. And so God is going to have to work with every single Jew and bring them back. God's going to do it with the other nations also, but the other nations is going to do that in a general way, as we're going to talk about more, God willing, tomorrow. And now let's do the Yom Yom.